What's up out there? We've got the Legacy of Phrecia event going full swing. I looked at the list of the various ascendancies that we had. For the Duelist Aristocrat, I thought Exsanguinate would be pretty cool, so I wanted to try that one out. The Paladin with Ice Crash, I thought that would be good because the War Cries, I did an Ice Crash build in Settlers League. I really liked it, and it worked in with the War Cries and everything. I thought that was going to be really cool. And Jorgen had a Marauder Ancestral Commander with Bone Shatter, which I had that same idea. So he took it and ran with it. I'd probably do something different, but I thought the same thing. I thought it looked really cool. That looked like a good place for Bone Shatter. Then the Antiquarian, Molten Strike or Volcanic Fissure looked pretty good on that one. Behemoth, I wanted to try Cyclone on. Behemoth is one that I definitely want to try. Not having any spells or not being able to use spells at all sounds kind of cool. Sounds like a big negative, but it also sounds like a kind of interesting way to play. Like, it sounds pretty cool anyway. I want to try Cyclone on that, but I'm not exactly sure where I want to go with it just yet. I'll probably try that one out next. The Architect of Chaos, I think it is. My spelling is, or all my letters are jumbled together. I don't write much anymore, so it's all bad. But the Vol skill one looked really cool. I want to try that one out. And then this build here was going to be a Harbinger Cyclone, but I am stalled out in Act 2. I'm just not doing much damage. This is horrible. So I learned a couple of things with this, and I've got a different build we're going to look at here in a second. But when I started this one, let me back up for just a second. I have played in Crucible, Ancestors, Affliction, Necropolis, and Settlers. So I've league started 5 times. Now, I had a Witch build that was in the standard that I played the very first time. I'm not counting that one. But in Crucible League, when I got done, I was in Crucible League when I first played this game. So when I actually tried League play out, I tried Righteous Fire. And I took that into Crucible, and then I league started Ancestor League with that as well. But then we had that change where they reworked how Righteous Fire worked and everything. So I ended up switching over to Bone Shatter because I felt a little helpless there. Like, even Pox didn't know what was going on with Righteous Fire at that point. So I swapped over to a tried and true Bone Shatter build. That was like the only melee build that was really good at that time. Then we had Necropolis League, which I also league started with Bone Shatter. So all 4 of the times that I've league started, now I may have league started in other times, like other events and things like that. But as far as actual leagues, I've got 5 league starts. So 4 of them have been with build guides and builds that kind of walk you through everything you need to do and all that. Settlers League, I actually started off with my build, and my whole goal with Settlers League was to not go through the Righteous Fire problem again of if a build was going to suck, I didn't want to have to try to figure out a new build to play. I wanted to have my own builds and do my own thing. So I league started Caustic Arrow on Shadow, I think. No, might have been a Ranger. I don't remember. It doesn't matter. The build sucked. It was a miserable experience, and I started to replicate that same experience here. So I actually started this off with the Harbinger has some channeling aspects to it in the Ascendancy, and Cyclone is a channeling skill. So I thought, hey, I'll just take channeling, and I didn't give it a whole lot of thought beyond that. So when I started working on my tree, I wasn't thinking about what this skill needed to be from Act 1 to Act 2 to Act 3. Basically, you can't switch over to Cyclone until like the middle of Act 3. You have to get level 28, I think it is. You have to be fairly far into the game before you can swap over to Cyclone. So you have to have something to actually start the league with. And given that I basically have 5 league starts, I've got 75, I've probably played 75 different characters because I've got like, I don't know, 18 or 20 different characters just this league alone. And every league that I've played, I play about 8 to 10, maybe 12 builds. So I've got at least 50 to 75, probably in that range of builds that I've played over the time. But I've only league started 5, 6, 7 times, something like that. Like, I've not league started all that much. So this would be the next time I'm league starting, so to speak. And I realized very quickly this build stalled out and it just kind of sucked and it just wasn't going anywhere. I didn't quite equate that I needed to have something to start with versus the other stuff. Because when I built this, or when I was building this in Settlers League, it was a twink. Like, it had all the extra uniques, and I had plenty of currency to draw from. Like, I had no drawbacks. I could solve any problems with some kind of gear. You know, oh, I got this issue, throw a unique on it and walk away. Well, I don't have that luxury at this point. So when I started working on this, like, my DPS is super low because I wasn't scaling spell damage. I'm working towards a melee cyclone build. Number one, I was thinking, okay, channeling is channeling. So I started off with lightning tendrils, and that stalled out real fast. And then I swapped over to blazing salvo because I thought that'd be kind of cool. And then it just kind of got mired down and everything too. So then as I started the next build that we're going to look at, I got to the concept of, hey, I really need to come up with something that I can league start and get the foundation rolling to where I can not only, it's not just getting to maps and doing the mapping part, it's the front part of it. The act, you know, the very first level 1 character that goes into up to, say, act 3 or something like that. I need a build that covers that range, not just mapping and, you know, getting further than that. So I've been tying, that thought's been rattling around in my head. Let's go take a look at the build that I'm actually working on right now. So what I'm actually working on for this Phrecia League, for my actual league starter, is going to be my Ice Crash build. I settled on that one. That one, I think, was the most complete build that I had, or out of the stuff that I wanted to try, it was going to be, like, I already had a POB for it. It was the most complete build. The rest of them would be something I would just kind of throw together and hope for the best. So this was actually one that I had a good POB, a passive tree for, and a kind of a good concept for it. I also started this build off with Pulverize because Pulverize is the same thing as Ice Crash in certain respects. So they're both slam skills now, and they both have AoE and everything with it. So a lot of the things that I could do with Pulverize also synergized over to Ice Crash, which is the problem that I ran into with my Witch Harbinger build, was that I was using a spell and then trying to switch over to an attack. And I was actually starting off with a spell and not trying to scale to it. So what I would have to do is find something that worked as an attack and then scale that up from there and build the character up from there. So a lot of problems. Whereas with this was far smoother because I was taking something that, and I know this seems like incredibly obvious, or it should be incredibly obvious, but like I said, I've only league started a few times. This isn't, and this is like the second league start that I'm doing on my own with a DIY build. So it's more of a learning curve and more of, hey, I need to fill this gap in where I'm going here. So, Perforate into Ice Crash was a really good move. And you don't get Ice Crash until, I don't know, Act 2 or 3, somewhere in there. It's like, I think it's Act 3. It's kind of like Cyclone. You have to do a bunch of stuff to get there. So, and we're currently sitting at level 63. So moving right along with this, I've basically got this where I want it to be. And I learned a lot as I was starting this build off too, because, there was a lot of things to take into consideration. So as I built this with Perforate, I knew not to come down here to like the cold damage and stuff like that. And there's elemental damage that I'm going to go pick up over here. I knew to avoid that, but there's a lot of similarities to this with attack speed. You've got evasion and things like that. You've got life regen, all this stuff, life accuracy, all that kind of stuff. The war cries, like I wasn't using war cries at first, so I didn't spec into those. I just kept coming up here to grab, you know, the max life and life regen and stuff like that. So it was kind of eye-opening to come down through this and see how all of this would go together from a league start perspective, as opposed to, like, when I built this, I built it from scratch and I was just putting nodes in where I wanted them. And then I, you know, refined it over time. This is actually league starting that. So it's a little different circumstance. And I ran into issues with mana. I had a lot of issues with mana, which I solved with life tap on my other build. And I just now put life tap in so I can probably come out of this spirit void and this other node here. I still needed the life and mana leech for something on the other build, so I'll probably leave that in. But I ended up going into like all this reservation efficiency and everything. some of this, like the reduced mana cost and stuff like that, that is stuff that I did not do on the first time I played this. So the tree is changing slightly as I go work on this, which I'm going to rework things and get it where it needs to be. But I also need a lot of reservation efficiency because eventually I do want to stack up all these different cries. So I've got, what do we got? Rallying Cry and Seismic Cry. What caught my eye about Paladin was, number one, what I started with is enemies taunted by you take 20% increased damage and deal 20% less damage. So there's those whatever flasks that give you armor that taunt enemies. I'm going to make sure I have that running. And I've also got the Intimidating Cry because this taunts nearby enemies as well. Now, the War Cries Have Infinite Power will not apply to me because I'm auto-exerting them, but I get 20% damage, increased damage, and 20% less damage, so I'm hoping that works really well. The other thing that I liked was Light of Divinity, and that's what gave me the idea to try Ice Crash, because nearby enemies take 25% increased elemental damage, and then summon the level 20s Elemental Relic. I'm going to probably try to go do that one too. I may do the Consecrated Ground one. I have not decided whether I want to do like Determination down here or we could do Grace, maybe level 30 Grace. To use that, I would have to make sure and come in and take Iron Reflexes. And I don't know that I'm going to take that because I didn't take it before. This other stuff about link targets, I don't know that I care necessarily, but you get increased aura effect and things like that. Not sure. I don't know how I want to play this out. I think I'm going to take Light of Divinity and Elemental Valiance, and then somewhere in this realm. It's going to be one of these. I'm not going to do anything with this link stuff, probably. But at any rate, this works really well, and I'm cruising right along. I've kind of been playing a little bit slower and spending a lot of time trying to get gear and everything, getting currency. Like, I haven't been just blasting through it. And I think that was one of the big problems that I had with Settlers League is I was getting frustrated because I had a number one, I had a bad build. And number two, I was really itching to be pushing as hard and fast as possible. And instead of just enjoying the game as it is and, just learning the experience or however you want to say that, I just wasn't, I don't know. I think I was pushing too hard, expecting too much out of a bad build. Rather than like now I'm sitting down trying to figure out how I can make it a good build and how I can have an actual league starter from this point forward. So, and then also, I think one of the things that I didn't spend enough time doing last time, or when the game froze. Been having this problem a lot too. Yep. So I've been spending a lot more time like working on my build, working on my early game, working on how I league start. I think that's something I realized as I play now. I need to spend a lot of time trying to figure out how my builds need to come together in the first place. And I probably need to do some practice runs, pick out one or two things. Like there's It Fights Back, that channel I watch him a lot. He'll do, and I didn't really quite get what he was, I understood it, but I didn't quite get it. But he'll start like with a brand new character and he'll just take stuff that's in his inventory. He'll actually just put all his stuff in his inventory, like currency and everything, and he won't spend the stuff that's in his stash. And I like that. I got what he was doing, like why he was doing it. It was like an extra challenge or whatever. But I'm thinking I need to start doing stuff like that, like doing SSF. If I'm doing SSF, I need to do a trade league start. If I'm doing trade league, I need to do SSF and practice having zero currency and starting up from scratch and at least getting characters up to say level act 3 or whatever, just to get them up into that point, building them up that way, even doing something like what he's doing, even if I am in a league where I've got a bunch of stuff done, just have stuff in my stash and not start with twink gear. I was doing that a lot with this league here for a little bit, but I had a lot of currency, so I was just buying stuff and then building up the gear as opposed to putting uniques on. Then at some point I just started putting uniques on and I was like, well, it kind of defeats the purpose at some point. But I need to do some league start practice and try this stuff out and just kind of get comfortable with it from there. Unfortunately, I have to go back walking through all this again. All right, so that's kind of where I'm at. I should be through the campaign as long as I don't keep crashing out like this. I should be through the campaign later today. And and then be into mapping tonight, I'm hoping for. Where did we stop? It was just up in here. So that is my hope, is to be done with the campaign today, into mapping tonight, and then spend time mapping and stuff tomorrow. I don't know exactly what builds I'm going to try. Oh, here's that one I crashed on. Let's get away from this thing so we don't crash again. Although I've crashed randomly here and there for whatever reason. But I don't know what I want to try next. I'm pretty sure that I want to try the Behemoth build next. That might be the one I go to, because that's the one that I'm most interested in. I would love to try all the different ascendancies that we have at our disposal, but there's just not enough time in this month-long event, and I'm going to probably go back to Settlers League. I don't really intend to go back to Path of Exile 2. I just don't like the game, and I don't think they're going to do enough to make it what I would want to play. Like, I don't like the extreme scarcity in the item drops. Playing this and actually having items drop and being able to have currency and do stuff is, I love this. Like, this is where it's at. This is what this type of game is. It's a loot driven game, and you get loot. You can go do stuff with loot. Why am I frozen? Am I actually frozen? Yeah, I've been getting frozen here. But like, I don't like the extreme scarcity in PoE 2, so that's a massive turnoff. So we've got that 0.2 that's coming out. I don't know that I'm going to check it out. So, and I also don't like the movement speed in PoE 2. I think it's atrocious. And you come in here and you've got all kinds of movement options, flasks, you know, Quicksilver flasks, and like my base movement speed in here is 35%, 75%. If I take these boots off, even at plus 5%, that's still, maybe that's about the, that feels like my PoE 2 character at endgame right there. And I can have options. Like, I don't need to have some cracked out speed freak movement, but like what PoE 2 has is just miserable. And I just do not vibe with PoE 2 at all. So I'm probably going to dump out of this league with whatever characters that I have. They said we're coming out to Settlers League, so these aren't voided characters. So my plan is to try to pick some things that I want to see, that I want to work on some ascendancies for. So like, I'll have another duelist, and then I'll have another marauder. So I don't know how we're going to get these out, but whatever we get in here, all the currency and all that stuff comes out to Settlers League. So I'm playing in trade this time. I'm also in trade in Settlers League, so I wanted everything here to just transfer right on over into that. I'm probably going to keep going with whatever builds I get, unless they make some drastic changes in PoE 2 that buff loot drops and movement speed. I don't think I'm coming back to PoE 2 until they release the full campaign. I'll finish that and then move on and watch how it goes. But I don't know. That's like besides the point. But at any rate, here's where I'm at. We're about to finish Act 9, about to work on all this boss stuff. And then I'll be moving on to Act 10 and into mapping. And then hopefully I'll have another video tomorrow with some cool progress on mapping or whatever. But anyway, that's going to do it for this video. We will catch you on the next one. Take care.